Hey everybody, so today we're going to be watercoloring our September 2013 card kit, and this month I have chose a super cute Sassy Cheryl stamp set called Patience Secret, and it comes with this cute girl image, this little row of ladybugs, a bird, and the little flower pot. It also comes with a sentiment. It's red rubber, and I love that it's mounted on a piece of this hard plastic stuff, so you could punch holes in this on the side and put it in a binder, or you can just leave it in a little package and stick it in there however you store your stamps. I just love that it comes with a little card and it has the picture on the back. So I have already stamped my images on Canson 140-pound watercolor paper, so let's color. So to color my image, I have my Tim Holtz Distress ink palettes, and they already have 3 inkers already in the little things. I have my medium and detail water brushes by Zig. I have a little piece of acetate that I taped to a piece of cardstock just so I can see the color on it. I have my crusty paper towel and my directions, and let's get started. So we're going to start by outlining my image with, let's do the sky first. So for that, we're going to use tumbled glass. So I'm going to go ahead and open my palette so I can see that. And then I'm going to squeeze my water brush, and I'm going to test it on the back of my hand to make sure it's not too damp. And if it is, you're going to wipe it off. So I'm going to grab a little bit, and I've got my medium brush because I'm going to cover a lot of area. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my tumbled glass on my brush. And I'm going to have my sky start up here by her elbow. So I'm going to start by wiping a little bit of my ink around, and I got quite a bit there, so I'm going to go ahead and brush that out this way. And I've used up quite a bit, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush off, and then I'm going to come back with just water, and I'm going to dilute that out just a little bit more. I want to pull it out here a little bit further. I want it to fade out here into nothing. Okay, I like how that looks, so I'm going to leave that. So I'm going to grab me a new dab of tumbled glass, and I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to add that. And I'm going to say these 2 little pieces of hair are just sticking out there. So I've wiped my brush off, and I'm going to come back with just water, and we're going to pull that ink out here a little bit. And as you go, you're going to pick up more and more ink, so I'm going to I continue wiping my brush off and come back with just water just so I can soften that edge a little bit more. Okay, so I've dabbed my brush off. I'm going to grab some more ink, and she's got, I'm going to wipe some of it off of in here, but right in here she's got a little empty space that's actually sky, same for right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get those, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off so I have just water. And again, I'm going to come back, and we're going to use that water to spread that ink away from her body out here into the background. But I want it to get, when it comes out here towards the outside, I want it to fade to just the paper. Okay, and that looks pretty good. So let's grab some more ink. And we're going to come over here, and let's add a little bit. Wipe all that excess off, and then come back with just the water and spread that out. Just want it to be a nice soft blue. Move my other brush over here. I keep lapping it with my arm. Okay, so let's add a little bit of blue over here. Go around our little butterfly, our little ladybug there. And then we'll spread that out a little bit more. Okay. I think I'll maybe bring it over this way a little bit more. And if your brush is feeling dry, you want to give it a little squeeze to add a little more water. But I think I'll just maybe pull my blue this way just a tad bit more. So it's over here behind this grass a little bit. Okay, that looks good. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, when I stamped these images on this piece, I put the girl on the block and I lined the ladybug on the stamp with the stamp and then stamped them on here. You could do it separate too. I just thought that was a nice spacing, the line between the stamps there. But they were smooshed right up together, and I just stamped them both on there. So next, let's go do the grass. So for that, we're going to use Shabby Shutters. So I've wiped all my extra ink off I have on my brush, and we're going to go grab some Shabby Shutters. And I'm going to start underneath of her. And just bring that ink out here. Fade it down into this. I'll wipe all my excess off. I'm going to grab a little bit more. And I'm going to add a little bit more on this side here. But I actually want to bring all of this down and kind of go around my ladybugs. So I'm going to go back up here into my ink and pick up some of this excess up with my brush. And then come down here and wipe it around a little bit. Okay, I've run out, so I'm going to dab my brush off all the way. I'm going to grab a little bit more. I'm going to add it underneath of her arm so it's a little bit darker. And then I have a little bit of excess, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe that down here behind this one little ladybug that was left. And you can make this as dark or as light as you want. So I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and we can add some more a little bit later. But now we're going to go and we're going to start her skin. So let's start up here on her face, that way the grass can dry. So we're going to grab some Tattered Rose. And I want her face to be darker on this side over here where the bow is, because it's kind of tipped up over here. So I'm going to lay my ink down on this side of her face. And she's got a little space right here that goes up. And we're just going to use that ink to bring over to this side. And it's fine if it runs out and you get clear over here to this side where her ear is, and it's hardly any ink at all. That's fine, because we're going to come back after it dries. We're going to add a second coat. This is just our first coat. Okay, so now I'm going to grab a little bit more. I've dabbed my brush off. I'm going to grab some more. I'll go in here. We're going to add a little bit to her hand. And if you have excess ink, wipe it off, and then come back and use just that water on your brush to spread it up towards the top of her hand. Okay. Right, so that's a pretty good first coat. So I'm going to go down here with my ladybugs. Now that that's what we're letting this dry, I'm going to add a little bit more color underneath them. So I'm going to grab some Shabby Shutters, and let's add a little bit of color right along the bottom here. And then I'm going to wipe my excess ink off. I'm going to go back and soften this so it's not quite such a stark line, and just spread that ink out a little bit more. Like that. And then you could go back, if you still want it darker than this, you could go back after it dries and add another coat. So while we've been doing that, her face is dried, so I'm going to go ahead and grab some more Tattered Rose on my brush. I'm going to turn her just a little bit so I can do a little bit better job of spreading here. So I'm going to add some, remember I want it to be darkest on this side. So I'm going to add my dark color over there. I'm going to wipe all my excess ink off my brush. I'm going to come back with just the water on my brush and pull this ink across her face over to her other ear. She's got a little space in between her hair there. Wipe that over here. Okay, that looks pretty good for a second coat, so I think I'm going to leave that, but let's go add a little bit to her arm. So I'm going to add a little bit more to her hand here, because her arm's looking kind of pale. And darken up this side a little bit more. Okay, now I'm going to allow that, and she's got a little piece of neck right here that I should probably color in right here. There. Okay, so I'm going to give that a couple of minutes to dry, and then we're going to come back and we're going to add some shadows to her face. Okay, so while I'm letting that dry, I decided that I was going to, instead of just waiting and waiting, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to start this flower pot. That'll give her face a chance to dry. So for the flower pot, I'm going to use tea dye for my first coat. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that on my brush. And I want to add my color where I want it to be the darkest. So I want it to be darkest along the edges. I'm just going to add my color right along the edge there. And then I don't have very much, so I'm just going to pull it towards the middle. Just give it that first nice light coat. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll wipe my brush off, and I'm going to grab a little bit more for the other side. So again, I'm going to go right down the side. And I think I'll add a little bit back here, since I got so much on my brush, just the back of this pot. Like that. And then again, I've wiped my brush off, and I'm going to come back with just this water on my brush and pull this ink in toward the middle so they touch in the middle. At least I'm hoping they do. Because I'm just wanting the center of my pot to be this nice light tan, and we're going to add another coat of vintage photo to the outside here. Okay, I'm liking that first coat. That looks pretty good. So as long as we're down here, let's add, let's see, well, our bird, we could add a coat of paint to him. So let's have to switch palettes. So for that, I'm going to use Scattered Straw. So I'm going to grab a little bit of Scattered Straw on my brush, and I want my bird to be darkest over this way. So I'm going to lay my ink down on this side, like this. And then all that excess I'm going to get rid of off my brush, and then I'm going to come back with just my water and spread it to this side of his little face. Like that. That gives him a nice light color over here, because we're going to add another shade of something else to him after he dries. So I'm going to grab a little bit more, and I want to do the same thing to his tail feathers down here. So let's add a little bit of color to that. And then wipe your brush off and use just water to soften that line up and bring it so the color covers the whole part of his tail feather. Okay, now we're going to let that dry. So while that's drying, let's go up here and we're going to add some shadows to her face. So shadows for her face, I'm going to use Tattered Rose and tea dye that I've mixed into one of my wells of my ink palette, and I use it all the time, so I don't mix it anymore. I just mix it in my palette, and then I just use it from that. But if you don't have it mixed, you would just dip a little bit of, grab some Tattered Rose on your brush and wipe it on your acrylic sheet, and then grab a little bit of tea dye, just a tiny dab of tea dye, just to add a little bit of shadows in there, and then use it all mixed up there. Okay, so I'm going to grab a little bit of my mixed paint, and I'm going to start down here on her arm. So I want her arm to have a little bit of shadow where her little sleeve is, and then right along the bottom of her hand. Same for this side. Add a little bit along the bottom of her hand, and my ink's getting diluted as I go, so I'm going to wipe my brush off and grab a little bit more for over here underneath the first sleeve. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to come back with just water, and I want to soften that line and pull it towards the top of her arm just a little bit. Same for this side. And as you go along, you may pick up too much ink, so you want to go ahead and wipe your brush off in between. It just depends on how much ink you had there in your line as to whether or not you're going to need to wipe it more than once. And go over here. Let's soften that just a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing for her face. So I'm going to grab a little bit of my mixed paint on my brush. I'm going to turn my girl so I can get my shadows in. So I want her to have a shadow underneath her bangs and kind of down this side of her face. So I'm going to run my brush right along those bangs, and she's got a little piece that kind of goes up there. You can see her scalp. And then I'm going to go along inside that ear and along her cheek. Okay, and I'm running out of ink, but I'm going to wipe that little bit of extra I still have on my brush off. And we're going to come back, and you're just going to wipe along that line. And I'm going to go back this way. And I'm just spreading it out onto her face so that when it gets over here on this side of her face, there's hardly any. But you've got a nice little shadow over here. Like that. So we're waiting for her face to dry. Let's add some shadows to our flower pot. And for that, I'm going to use Vintage Photo. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that on the end of my brush. And I want it to be shadowed along the edges again. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of my ink down the side of my pot. Maybe pull it underneath this rim just a little bit. Okay, and then I'm running out of ink, so I'm going to go ahead and wipe my brush off. I'm going to come back. I'm going to soften that and pull it towards the middle. You don't want it to dry. Mine's drying pretty fast here. Actually, I need to be a little bit faster. So I'm going to grab a little bit more. Go down the side of my pot here. And pull that out. I want to get a little bit faster, so I don't want to have such a harsh line right there. Okay, that looks better. And I want it to have a terracotta kind of feel to it, so I don't mind if it's, you know, has some lines and stuff in there. That gives the terracotta pot its whole cute appeal for me. Okay, and do the same thing on this side. And let's go down this side of the pot too. So let me turn it this way. And we're just going to go down this side. And again, maybe pull a little bit out here. And we'll just use that little bit of ink to pull into the middle. Soften that little line up a little bit more here. Okay, let's get the rim. And we'll just pull that out here like that. Oh, that looks pretty good. So let's do a little bit. I'm going to make the inside just a little bit darker. So I'm going to grab some of my ink and go up here and I'm going to darken the inside of the pot. Like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, I'm liking how that looks, so I'm going to leave that. Let's go over here and we'll add some color to our bird. And so for his shadow, I used Gathered Twigs. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that on my brush. And again, I want him to be darkest towards his tail feathers back here, but I don't want my color to go clear over here. So I'm going to put a little bit of this color back like this. Let's go like that. That looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to use that color to pull out like this. Okay, now I've picked up a lot of ink on my brush, so I can see it on there. So I'm going to wipe all that off. And I'm going to come back. And you want to be quick. You don't want this line to dry like mine's drying. You want it to be quick so you can go back over this line. And we're just going to pull that out. I'm going to pull it a little bit further out here so it can be brown up the front of him just a little bit. Okay. Like that. That looks pretty good. So let's let that dry for a second, but let's add a little bit back here to his little tail feathers. So I'm going to grab a little bit on my brush, my Gathered Twigs, and we're going to add a little bit of shadows to our tail feather. Come back, brush that again. And And then I also want to add a little bit to his bottom wing here. I think I'll grab a little bit more. That's not very much. Okay. Okay, I'm liking that so far. So while we're allowing our bird to dry, let's go and add some cheek color to our girl. So I'm going to go ahead and mix a little bit of my worn lipstick. So I'm going to grab a little bit on the end of my brush, and I've got my piece of acetate here. So I'm just going to dab a little bit of that on onto my acetate. I'm going to wipe my excess ink off my brush, and then I'm going to dip it into the aged mahogany. But I'm going to get just a tiny bit, not hardly any. So I've got a little bit there on my brush. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to swirl that into my paint on my palette. And I'm going to use this little bit of mixed paint for her cheek color. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that, and I'm going to give her some cheeks right here. Okay, and I'm diluting my paint, so I'm going to grab some more paint, and I'm going to do the other side. So let's do like this. Okay, and then I'm going to wipe my brush off, and then I'm going to come back. I'm just going to very lightly tap my brush up and down just around the outside edges of that circle. Just tap, tap, tap it, and that will soften that edge. I don't want to pull it out any further. I just want the edge not to have a huge line on it. Okay, so I'm liking how that looks for my first coat. So I'm going to set my palette aside, and we're going to go and we're going to add a coat to her hair while we're waiting for her cheeks to dry. So for her hair, we're going to start with old paper. So you're going to grab some old paper on your brush. And I want to start where I want my hair to be darkest, and it's going to look green when you put it on. That's fine because we're going to move it around. So I'm just going to put a little bit of that color up here at the top of her head, and I'm going to wipe all the excess off. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to pull that color down clear to the bottom of her hair. I want to use all that ink up and spread it out so when it gets done, it's not green. It's just a nice light base coat. Kind of a light tannish. Go all the way down this side. I've still got quite a bit on my brush, so I'm going to go over here and do this side just a little bit. Okay. And see, it's kind of a nice light, I guess yellow color. After you've spread it out, it's not green anymore. But that gives it a nice base to get started. So while that's drying, let's skip over here and we will work on our flower pot again. So let's color the leaves. So for that, we're going to use some of our shabby shutters again. So I think I will actually grab my detail brush because it's a little bit smaller and I won't have to worry about going outside the lines on those cute little stems. So grab a little bit of my shabby shutters, and let's start down here on these leaves. So we're going to add some color to that. A little bit more. Okay. And then we want to get these leaves, the stems. And they're pretty small, so you're going to want to just get a little bit of paint on the end of your brush. And sometimes if I've had my brush for a while, it starts to fray and look all crusty, so it may be if it's not have a nice point, you may need to get a new one. I try to keep mine so it looks, so when I get it wet, it's nice and smooth and pointy at the end. Okay, so let's grab a little bit more. I think I'll add a little bit more shadow right down here on this one, just a little bit. Okay, so let's add our second coat of, it's gathered twigs to our little bird here. So I'm going to go ahead and go right over this line that I laid down before, and I'm going to, since it's got such a harsh little line there, I wasn't fast enough the first time I went through, so it left this icky looking line. I don't like that. So I'm going to go back over it and add a little bit more color. There. That covers up that terrible line that I had stuck back there. I don't want to have that on there. I think I'll actually add a little bit more to his wing too. My brown wasn't looking brown, it was looking more like paste. So I'm going to darken him up just a little bit here. And we'll get his little tail feather too. This side. Oh, there, that looks much better. I'm liking him better now. Like that. And then as long as we're coloring him, let's finish him up and do some vintage photo on his beak. So wasn't any fancy stuff. I just went in and added some color to his beak. Like that. And that's all there was to that. So let's go over here and add a coat to the center of our flower. So the center of our flowers, we're going to use scattered straw. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some of that. And I'm just going to give each flower a little swirl. And then later I went in and added some glossy accents to the center of the flowers. So let's add a coat of vintage photo to our hair. So make sure my brush is all wiped off. I'll grab a little bit of vintage photo. And I want it to be darkest down here on the bottom a little bit of her hair. So I'm going to add a little bit of color. And my brush is starting to run out, so that's perfect. So if it wasn't, I'd wipe it off, but there's not hardly any on here, so I'm just going to wipe that little bit of extra up towards the top, so it kind of browns up her hair a little bit. I'm going to wipe the water and everything off my brush. I'm going to grab some new vintage photo. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Just going to go right along the edges. And this time I have quite a bit, so I'm going to wipe that extra off and come back and use just my water and my brush to spread this up towards the top. I'm going to pull that towards the top of her bangs, like that. Looking cute. Okay, wipe all the excess off my brush, grab some more vintage photo, and go up here, and we're going to add a little bit right up here. And I'm going to wipe that excess off because I have quite a bit. I'm going to pull this side down, okay, and I picked up a bunch of ink, so I'm going to wipe that off. And we're going to come back. And we want to spread this ink down. And I want to touch the bottom of her little bangs just a little bit so they're not light yellow. They have a nice tannish red color to them now. And doesn't her little bob look cute? So I'm liking how her hair looks, so I'm not going to give that a second coat. If you think yours needs another coat, you're just going to add some more vintage photo on top of that, but I really like that. So for her face, we added her cheek color, but I want to kind of soften how harsh they look. So I'm going to grab me a little bit of my tattered rose on my brush. And you want to lay it down where you want your shadow, so I'm going to start over here. And then I'm going to wipe, if I have too much, I'm going to wipe that excess off. And I just want to use water to spread that little bit of cheek color I laid, or that tattered rose color I laid down clear over here onto this side. Whoops, and I ran out, so let me grab a little bit more. So I evidently don't want to wipe it that far, so let's go ahead and add a little bit of our tattered rose right here underneath this cheek, and then use that little bit to just spread up over the top of her cheek. That'll help soften that line that's going, at least mine has this huge little, I want them to look more rosy, not have just a blobby line sitting on there. Okay, so now I'm liking how she looks. So let's go up here and add a coat to this cute little hair bow. And for that, we're going to use dried marigold. So let's get a little bit of that. And I'm going to put that down here along the bottom. My brush is running out, so I won't have to wipe it off. Let's bring this over here to this side. Okay, that's a good first coat. So we're going to use the same color on her shirt. So we're going to grab a little bit down here. And I didn't color her collar. I left that just the color of the paper. I'm going to add a little bit of that red marigold down here on her shirt. Grab a little bit more for the other side. use that. I got quite a bit there, so I'm going to wipe my brush off and just use that to spread it around. Alright, that looks pretty good. So let's go up here and add a little bit more to our hair bow because it's dried. I'm going to grab a little bit. I want it to be a little bit darker here along the bottom. Let's grab a little bit more. This one. Okay, we're going to let that dry. So let's jump over here. We're going to leave that for a minute. And let's add some color to our flower. So for our flowers, we're going to use barn door. So I'm going to grab some barn door on my brush. And it's pretty red. So I saved it to last so I wouldn't get it on everything else. So I'm going to just pick a flower petal and add a little bit of color to the center. Okay, and I got quite a bit of ink still on my brush, so I'm going to wipe all that excess off, and I'm going to come back before this dries and pull this red out towards the end of your petals. Like that. That way they're darker in the center, get lighter out at the outside. Okay, so grab some more of your barn door, and you're going to do the same thing. So pick a few more petals, and I try to do a couple, 2 or 3 at a time. I don't want to have so much ink that they dry. And I'm going to pull that ink out here. And you may have to, after they dry, you may want to go back and add a second coat. Depends on how dark red you want your flowers to be. Okay, that looks pretty good. So grab some more ink and continue around to this side. Oops. Colored the inside of my flower there. And that is not going to come off, so I'm just going to have to leave that, and we'll put some sparkles on there. I'm going to do the same thing for the other flower. Brush that right up here towards the top. Okay. Go down here. Oops, and I probably should have done these over here first so I didn't accidentally wipe my hand in it. But we're just going to be careful. Try to keep my hand, be aware that it's wet so you don't get your hand in everything. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm liking those. So I'm going to leave my flower pot like that. If you wanted it after it dries, you want to add a second coat, you could go ahead and do that. Let's skip back over here and work on her little shirt again. So I'm going to grab some more of my dried marigold on my shirt, on my brush. And I'm going to add, I want to add a little bit more shadow. So let's add a little bit of shadow underneath of her hair and along the bottom of her shirt right here. I'm going to pull that line up so it's not quite so harsh. And grab a little bit for the other side. Pull this side up. And okay, that looks really good. So I'm going to leave that. I'm liking that. Well, maybe let's add a little bit more to this second bow up here. I think maybe this top bow maybe needs just a little bit more. Darken it up down here on the bottom just a tad bit more. Okay, I'm liking that, so I'm going to leave that. Okay, so our little ladybug friends down here, we are going to color those with Barn Door. And because they're so small, I'm going to switch to my detail brush. And I'm going to grab me some paint. And I just want to paint each one with my Barn Door. Okay, so 2 is about all I could do with the ink I had on my brush, and then I'm going to wipe off the excess. I'm going to get some more, because I want them to be really red. Okay, and again, 2 was all I could do before the water, my brush is wet, so the water is diluting the paint as I go. Okay, and let's grab one more little dab for this cute little one she's got on her shoulder right here. And I waited for him for last because we had just worked on her shirt, and I wanted to make sure that it was dried. So that is our cute little patient's secret, and let's put our card together. Okay, so I collected all my parts, and I've made sure that my girl is dry, and I don't have any parts that are going underneath anything, so we can just start putting it together. So I'm going to start by attaching her to her mat, and I made sure all those ladybugs were dry before we start fiddling with it. Tape runner on here, and we're going to attach her like that, and then I'm also going to give her some Sharpie white paint pen. So I'm going to shake my pen with the lid on, and I'm going to give her a couple of dots on her cheeks, and then I also added some to whoops, let's go in a little bit so you can see, to her little hair bow up here. So I'm just going to dot however many dots you want on your hair bow, or if you don't want any, don't put any on there. Okay, I think those look pretty good. So now let's put our card together. Okay, so I'm going to set her over here so she can dry. And I'm going to, let's attach this yellow piece to the tan piece. You could also use the cute bicycles around the back if you'd like want to use that piece. They're super cute. Okay, I'm just going to put this one on this one. Like that. And then we're going to attach this one to the card base because we don't have anything going underneath. Like this. Okay, now you'll want to decide which way you want your card to open before you start putting anything else. So next is this little cute blue piece. And it is kind of up here in the corner. Yeah, about right there. And then next comes this cute little notepad. I think it's a notebook. Well, it's a My Favorite Things die. It's a 3x4. It's either note paper or notepad. I can't remember which one. But I stamped my cinnamon already to save time with Versamark Onyx Black ink. And that is my cinnamon ink of choice. So we're going to attach that. And I did, when I stamped it, I used my Stamp-O-Majig so that I could get it straight. Because I stamped it the first time and I didn't get it straight and it drove me crazy. So just a little hint, if you're, need to have it straight like I do, use your Stamp-O-Majig. Like that. Okay, then next came this cute little red polka dot piece. Or you could use the stripes if you like the stripe side. And this one was just set cattywampus, and I want to have room for my little scallop die at the bottom, so let's do, how about like this? That looks good. Next came this My Favorite Things scallop die. I can't remember if it's a Simply Scallop or the Open Doily, but it's new. So if you love that, go pick it up. And there's three dies in the set. So you get 3 different size scallops. This we're going to put down here, and it's not the same size as the red piece. It's going to stick out. So kind of watch it on the ends here to make sure you get them pretty you know, even. You don't want it to stick out ½ an inch on this side. It won't fit into your envelope. So there we got that. And then next comes our girl. And she's going to need some pop dots. I love pop dots, so let's go ahead and put some of those on the back here. Like so. Everything for me has to be all popped up. And that. And this one, and that one, and it always takes me twice as long to get those stupid pop dot things off. Okay, so this is not straight. I kind of set it like this underneath of my saying over here. So let's do, and I wanted to leave enough room on this over here on this side for the flower pot. So let's move it this way like that. And then that leaves you with a flower pot and this cute little bird. And I cut these out. So I'm just going to show you what they look like on the other card because I don't want you to have to sit there and watch me cut them out. And they're both popped up with pop dots. Oh, and this bird right here, I forgot to put some ground. For that I used some pumice stone. So I'm sorry I forgot that while I was painting. But I'm not going to go, I put all that away already. So pumice stone. So here is the finished card, and see how it's got the little bit of ground underneath here. And it might be best if you cut him out first and then put it on so that you know how far you want it to go out. But I left a border around him so that you could leave his cute little hair. And then I have the flowers over here. And I can admit that when I cut the flowers out, the stems are really, really small, and I broke mine. So when I popped them up, I just made sure to get them close enough that the little stem is looks like it's attached, but I cut it in half on accident. So you might consider going all the way around like the bird here, leaving a shadow on the outside, but I cut mine close, so that didn't happen. Then I put some glossy accents in the center of each of the flowers, and then I used my stickles on the outside of the flowers to give them some sparkles, and I did stickles on my bird's tail feathers and his little wing right here. But that is our September 2013 watercoloring card kit featuring Patience Secret. And I hope you had fun coloring with me today. If you have a question, leave me a comment and I will get back to you. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Have a great day.